Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to another quest of the regenerative renaissance. Now, these quests, in very simple form, are all about helping us heal ourselves. And what I mean by ourselves is the understanding that ourself is much more than just our physical bodies. They are the plants that we eat, the water that we drink, the air that we breathe, the families that we live with, the tribe that we spend our lives with, and so much more. And today's quest is quite special because we're going to get into helping heal the relationship between all the non-human life forms that live within us. So there's about 70 trillion human cells in our bodies, and there's about 14 quadrillion non-human cells of bacteria, fungi, yeast, protozoa, and so much more non-human living organisms living within us, outnumbering us, again, 200 to 1. And humans are about 200,000 years old as a species, while these organisms can be billions of years old. So truly, there's a very good point that could be made that we're just big cities for these other organisms, and that we are here to house them. But we don't have to go that far. What we do have to say is that these other forms of life are the foundation for our health and our wholeness. So a lot of these quests are going to center on healing our relationship to the rest of life, whether that's healing our relationship to the water we drink, the air that we breathe, or the food that we eat. So there's going to be a lot of quests centered around creating these food forests. And another big part of these quests is they're meant to be really simple, really easy, because life is overwhelming. It's intentionally designed to be overwhelming, so that we can't ever find the time to be able to heal ourselves. So a big part of these quests is about helping simplify and also make a lot of fun that journey towards healing and wholeness. And that might just be redundant because healing is the path towards wholeness. Wholeness, again, understanding the web of life and all the other organisms that we share this planet with, that when we recreate that relationship and our connection with them, we become healthier. We heal. And a very practical reason why we're doing this and why we're giving out tokens and organizations, and we'll get into all that about how you can claim ownership in some organizations or claim contributions to organizations and earn tokens through completing quests. And why I'm doing this is I would love to be able to create New Realities with People, which is the organization that's hosting these quests, which is ReGen Civics. If you want to know more about that, you can watch a video on ReGen Civics in the show notes. However, long story short, ReGen Civics is on a quest to co-create a growing diversity of regenerative realities. Now, what is a regenerative reality? It's reimagining how we live on this planet, how we raise our families. And this is very alive for me because I've got a 1.5-year-old going on 800 years. This kid is incredibly wise and ridiculous. And I'm coming face to face with all of the challenges that modern society puts up against us in order to just healthily raise children. So when I talk about regenerative realities, a big part of it is how do we raise the next generation of humans? And they need to be raised in a way that helps them become really freaking healthy, because the challenges humanity is facing right now globally are monumental. And the new generations being brought onto this planet right now, they need all the help they can get in order to fully thrive in this ridiculous time that we're alive in right now. So, with all of that being said, we're going to dive into a bunch of different quests, and I want to give you a highlight on some of the quests you might start running into. We're going to get into quests on how to set up these healing holes. This one's several months old now. I've already gathered a ton of food from this, but this ground months ago looked like this. Actually, that's already healing. It looked a lot like this. It was actually the worst part of this land that I started digging these holes and putting in what I call a healing hole. And we'll walk through that journey. And it was free, didn't cost me any money. And look at this. Like, there's so much food being able to be produced out of this once infertile land that could hardly sustain grass. Look at that. And look at these holes. So there'll be quests on healing holes. There'll be quests on going out and gathering spring water and reconnecting with our relationship with the flowing waters and living water. But today's quest is really going to focus on those microorganisms that I talked about. So the first part of this quest So now in this particular quest, it's highly encouraged that you do it multiplayer because the first part of it is going out into the forest. So look in your bioregion. This is the area that shares the same kind of temperature and climate that you are living in, that you spend most of your time in. And go and find the oldest growth forest in that bioregion. And this might require that you do a little bit of hiking, which is why we want it to be multiplayer, because sometimes it's not great to go hiking out on your own. And when you go out there and find the most beautiful, densest, greenest, luscious part of your bioregion, go and collect up some soil. You don't need much soil, just a handful will do. And then go and do this throughout a whole bunch of different spots on your walk. Now, I've done this for about 2 weeks now. I've been going to a whole bunch of different places in my bioregion. I'm very fortunate to live in a place where it has a lot of semi-old growth forests still intact. And I went and gathered up a diversity of different soils. And essentially what I'm doing here is I am gathering a diversity of life, because there is so much life living in that soil. And again, that life is the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoas, all the nematodes, etc. There's so many microorganisms that are living in that soil that also live in the soils within our bodies. Now, if you want to really get into like microorganisms and how important they are and how critical they are to our health, I highly suggest you looking into Zach Bush. There'll be a link to one of his videos down below that dives into some of the science behind what these microorganisms do for us. But in short form, we wouldn't be alive without them. We require them. And our war against bacteria and yeast and fungi and these microorganisms has been a war against life, and is pretty evident today with all of our diseases and chronic illness and the decline in our health and cognitive abilities and so much more, that we're not winning this war, because how could we? How could we win a war that's against ourselves? So the first part about this healing journey is healing that relationship with these microorganisms that live within us. It's healing our gut, which is then at the foundation of our health. So the very first part of this quest was, again, go out and collect some soil. Doesn't have to be much, scattered throughout the oldest growth forests within your region. And it's highly encouraged then, as part of this quest, to bring a gift out to those forests as well. So this might be a basket of compost. Please make sure it's all organic. It might be some humanure. Forests and ecosystems love humanure. We're also going to get into a quest on humanure in the future, but stay tuned for that one. So as you go and take some soil, it's really beautiful to leave a gift back to that forest and return nutrition as you're taking a gift and create that symbiotic relationship. Okay, now I'm going to take you into the kitchen and we're going to show you how we can prepare a beautiful healing tonic with this life-giving soil. Okay, welcome to my kitchen, and here you actually see some remnants of future quests, such as saving seeds, which we'll get into, wild foresting for some beautiful, awesome mushrooms and other wild plants that are just so nourishing for us. But we're going to get into the quest for today. Now, what I have here is a simple compost brew, which is really, really awesome for your plants and soil as well. But this is just the starter culture, if you will. And that's what we have in here right now. And as you spin it, you actually see all the bubbles coming up. The bubbles are signs of all the other microorganisms and life that is in here. In short form, it's salt and potatoes and molasses and coconut oil. So a lot of the same things, but I'm not going to add potatoes or very much salt to my kombucha. And the reason we use salt is salt creates a more hospitable environment for some biology biology that's more accustomed to us because we are saltwater. So the biology that lives in us wants a saltwater environment because that's what we are. So we're kind of mimicking the environments within us as we're making our kombucha. So in the show notes, you've got a recipe for kombucha that I'm going to roughly follow. I'm going to use yerba mate because I love it. And there's going to be a small change because I'm not just going to use sugar, which is what's recommended. I'm also going to be adding some coconut oil or whatever oils that you want to be able to add because fungi loves oil. So, bacteria and some yeasts, which yeasts are also fungi, but, fungi also love sugar. But anyway, only fungi can break down oil. So I want to make sure I'm getting a bunch of fungal food as well, because that's essentially what we're doing here, is we're going to be providing food for these microorganisms to multiply, and that's what's going to make our kombucha that we're going to end up drinking and adding more organic life and diversity and genetic possibility into our beings. Now this is very similar to kombucha, such as the brand and bottle that you see here right now. However, there's a massive difference. If you look at the back here of this kombucha, you see 1 billion of one organism, 4 billion of another organism, and 4 billion of another organism. So in this bottle, there is 9 billion copies of 3 organisms. Now to put that in perspective,
so what you see here is an excerpt from Scientific American where they showed that the Hazda, a hunter-gatherer tribe in Africa, had about 730 different species of gut microbiology, while those studied in California had only 277 species. So you're seeing that industrial lifestyles and the Western lifestyle actually dramatically decreased the diversity of life in our guts.
However, I believe that the more diverse there is, the healthier we are, same as our food forests in any ecosystem. So there's a monumental difference between drinking kombucha and drinking kombucha made from living soil organisms, because there is potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of different organisms living in this. We don't even know all of the different organisms, and new organisms are being created all of the time. So the amount of life that could potentially be in this, and every time you go out and gather soil, you're gonna get different types of life. So every time you make one of these batches, you're adding new diversity, new organisms, new genetic potential, and new possibilities into our organism. But if you keep drinking industrial kombucha, every time you're doing it, you're just adding 9 billion copies of the same 3 organisms. So essentially what you're doing is you're overwhelming your system with a monoculture. This would be like going out into your food forest and being like, corn is good, so let's have a whole dump truck of corn that we're just going to dump into our food forest because corn is good. So it was a massive improvement to say that, living organisms are good for us. However, it's really important to understand diversity and making sure we're not creating a monoculture in our gut. I got addicted to kombucha. I loved it. The first time I had it, I felt incredible. And that's probably because I didn't have very much of these organisms. So I was adding new diversity to my life. So it felt amazing. My body's like, yes, this is good. But after many years of drinking that, thinking I was doing something good, I actually created an imbalance. And I started having a whole bunch of different bacteria, yeast, and fungal problems. I started getting headaches when I drank kombucha, and this is what led me on a long journey of trying to understand what was going on here. And I just couldn't fathom that the kombucha was the problem until I understood it from this context. It's like, oh, if we're meant to have 30,000, if not more, hundreds of thousands of different organisms, then it doesn't make sense to keep drinking the same 3 organisms over and over. So, kombucha, incredible, if it's wild cultivated with different organisms every time. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing here. So let's go through this. We're going to take a blender here, and I'm going to go and get some water and put it in it. Now I don't need all that much water, and I always use wild harvested spring water, because again, that spring water has living organisms in it. That's why spring water is so great for you. Wild distilled water and bottled water and dead water is absolutely not. So you always see in different kombucha recipes where they say, make sure it's always a sanitary environment and yada, yada, yada. You know, the big challenge with that and why batches go bad is actually because of the sanitization process. Because if you get rid of all of the competition diversity, then it becomes possible for one species to come in there and overpopulate, and that's when all the problems happen. The problems happen with essentially monocultures. And any bacteria, yeast, or fungi, if it becomes a monoculture, it becomes problematic. So when you sanitize your whole environment and you wipe it clean, you're making it more easy for it to become a problem rather than less. So it's totally fine with it being dirty. I've made kombucha tons of times. I'm constantly, not super clean doing it, and they always work out better. So I've got wild spring water that's going to add its own life with it. And this is going to be our starter culture. So in the recipe, when it says how much of existing kombucha to use, treat this as an existing batch of kombucha. So each one of these has, for every gallon, again, look at the recipe for how much salt to add, but I've already added the salt to these tubs and to that as well. Okay, and why I have 3 different containers is I'm going to end up making 3 different flavors in 3 different batches, because that's the last piece to all of this. And with all of our quests is diversity. So I highly discourage, following the recipe below and doing it the same way every single time. It's highly encouraged to go out and collect different, soil from different parts. Adding a little bit more molasses sometimes, a little bit more coconut oil other times, different flavors of tea, different types of sugar. So I've got a different type of sugar here I've never used, which is sucant organic sugar. Now you always want to use whole sugars, all the sugars that are brown. Some recipes want that white sugar stuff, forget about it. You want to make sure it's whole sugar. So whether it's whole cane sugar or coconut sugar or sucant or whatever it is, make sure you're getting whole sugar. And that's the idea behind molasses as well, is it's all the, the whole parts that contain everything else. So you're getting iron, potassium, vitamin B6, magnesium, zinc, and all these other minerals that are really important for the health of microbiology as well as us. And what I've got here is some yerba mate. So I've used about 5 tablespoons here, which is going to be enough, in my opinion, for these 3 gallons of kombucha that I'm about to make. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to follow the recipe now and add it all to the blender. I use about 4 tablespoons of yerba mate for every gallon. I use about a cup of sugar for every gallon. I use about a tablespoon of molasses per gallon and about a tablespoon of oil per gallon. Now again, these aren't, fixed numbers. Every batch could be slightly different. You can add different teas. And again, I highly encourage you mixing it up. But essentially what you need is whole foods. You need your fats, your sugars, your complex carbs, etc., which is where the potatoes came in earlier, in order to feed these microorganisms. Okay, so now I have the food. It smells delicious. I would love to just drink that. And one more thing that you're noticing here is all of these containers are glass, right? I did make this batch in metal, and I don't normally do that. However, I was in a hurry that day. I'm a new father, so life's a little bit crazy. So I don't necessarily recommend using metal, and I definitely don't recommend using plastic or anything that could leach into your health brew here. So we've got glass, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this glass cup here, and I'm going to get a couple cups of kombucha and add it to each one. So essentially you're going to take a cup of it and pour it through a strainer like so, making a little bit of a mess here. And you see, I love it dirty. I love giving a nice home. So you see there's a bunch of leaf litter and soil and a whole bunch of sticks and twigs. I mean, it is just forest. It is earth. It is life that's in here. And some of us find this disgusting, but humans are literally designed to do this. I watch my son, he goes outside and he is stuffing soil and dirt and all this gross quote unquote stuff in his mouth all of the time. So we are literally designed to go out there and get biology, get life, and put it into our bodies. I believe this is also why we have the drive to make out and kiss each other and spread our biology. So it's a big part of our drive to share biology, to share diversity, to grow life. So I really want to encourage, not finding this disgusting. And legitimately, this tastes good. Oftentimes when I go out into the forest, I find really good patches of soil. I just take a teaspoon, pop it into my mouth, and I suck on the beautiful juices that come of it. Again, this is what babies do. It is a totally normal process to add biology. And ever since I've been doing this, my life has transformed. But we'll get into more of that stuff later. So I just did one of these. I'm going to do about 3 to add to this. And then I'm going to add some more to these guys. Each one of these is a gallon, so I'm going to do about 2 cups worth, which is about 3 of these, minus all of the material. So you want about 2 cups of actual liquid that is going to go into each of these containers. And then I'll top it off by spreading this stuff out evenly between them all. So then I'll see you at the end of all that. All right, so here we are. And a big part of this is learning to trust our bodies again, getting back in tune with our bodies. So a lot of this healing process is, again, learning to trust our bodies. And our bodies are incredibly intelligent. So why I'm telling you this is you're going to know if this goes, quote, bad, if it smells bad. So I smell it right now, and it smells good. It doesn't smell like cracky, like fast food, addictive, ridiculous junk food good. I don't want to actually, I do want to hop in there, and I literally do swim with some of my mixtures and rub it on my body. I am going to do that with this little batch of yumness here. You actually see some tomatoes that I took from my garden and fed it. And it smells good. But if you leave it for too long and it runs out of food or anything like that, it starts dying, then it'll smell terrible. So your body will tell you if it's good or bad. If your kombucha stinks and your body says, no, I don't want to drink it, trust that. Because your body is going to know. So when these are done, and I'll make the final video showing, at the end of this, it's going to taste good. And if it doesn't, you messed up, just get rid of it. Now, the extra part that I have left over, I am going to rub some of this on my body because I'm going to spread those microorganisms on my skin and help create a healthier skin barrier. And I have fantastic skin because of this, in my opinion. No breakouts or acne or anything like that because these microorganisms are helping protect my skin. This is super nourishing. If, I put this on, I used to have athlete's foot and I had it for so many years, like forever. And I actually think it was because of my addiction to kombucha, and I was creating that monoculture in my body that things like that, the fungal infection that is athlete's foot was able to take hold. And I cured it, finally, by making a wild harvested soil batch of delicious, amazing goodness. I don't even know what to call this stuff. It's just like pure goodness. And I was soaking my foot in it every day it only took a couple days, but, I think it was maybe 1 week in total, and it was completely gone, and it hasn't come back since. So I am going to keep rubbing it on there and rubbing it on my body, just, preventive and functional medicine, taking care of things so there isn't a future problem. But that's essentially what this is. This is medicine. Kombucha was seen as medicine. All of our ferments and brews, from beer to everything else, used to have wild fermentation processes. So every time that community got around a fire and drank the next batch of beer, it wasn't the exact same yeast and fungi and bacteria that went into brewing that beer, which is what we have today. When you have your industrial beers and you keep drinking the same one, it's the same organisms. So we're creating monocultures which are degrading our health. Now, if you're making wild fermented brews, which you can do with all this could be your starters for so much more, so many different ferments. This is the foundation to so many different medicines we could be making. But this is just the basic one. It's following a basic kombucha recipe using yerba mate, which I love, but there's a million different ways we can go about creating this. All right, so the very final step we're going to do is we're going to cover it. So I'm going to take a lid like that. Not a lid. It's got to be able to breathe oxygen, but you don't want, fruit flies and other things coming in here and dying. That'll get really gross. So you don't want that. And you also don't want anything floating above the water level. So I think there's a tiny wood chip that made it through right there. So we're just going to fish that guy out. And we're going to make it so nothing can go above the water level. Otherwise, other nasty stuff can take hold there. Because underneath the water level, you've got all the other microorganisms that ensures that there's no single organism that can get out of whack. I know this is a little bit weird. It's probably challenging a lot of the assumptions and presuppositions that our medical science tells us today about what is health, and teaching us to fear, fungi, bacteria, and looking them as, being the problem, rather than seeing them being the foundation, the literal foundation of life on this planet. And they are allies. They outnumber us 200 to 1. Let's support them. Let's create more diversity in our bodies so that we have more health, more genetic potential, more resilience, and in a way, even more consciousness. Because the last thing I'll share with you, and this is something Zach Bush was sharing, which just made so much sense to me, is we have neurons that go through our stomach. So neurons being, how we connect intellectually throughout our whole being, that go into our stomach environment, where all of these microorganisms are living and are literally interacting with the other consciousnesses of these other microorganisms in our stomach, that's bringing in information about our environment and so much more. So if we can increase the consciousness, the diversity, the different perspectives, if you will, of what's being brought into our bodies, we're increasing in a very practical and a tangible way our own consciousness and our own understanding of the world around us. So I don't know if I could even understate how important this type of medicine is. Where do you store them? So the hotter it is, the faster they're going to multiply and grow, the faster the fermentation process is going to go. If it goes too fast, that could be problematic. If it goes too slow, it could just take way too long. So again, this is where diversity comes in. I prefer room temperature. However, in my house, it's multiple stories, so there's multiple versions of room temperature. So I'm going to put one upstairs, one downstairs, and one on the main floor. So I'm just going to experiment myself with different temperatures for these different brews. It's also one of the reasons why I made multiple of them, so I can keep experimenting to find out, what works best for me. Highly recommend that. And again, just smell them each day, come and taste them. And if they ever start going off, you messed up, start over, try again. But yeah, it's pretty simple. So, okay. Okay, beautiful people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cap this one off with this. I've got, I can't do it with one hand. And I've got this beautiful silk cloth that is breathable that I'm going to be putting on top of these other two containers and making sure they're covered. And that is it. And I will see you all, and probably, again, I'm going to follow my nose test. I'm going to give them 3 days minimum, and then I'm going to start tasting them. And once it gets to a day where I taste it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I'm going to be able to put it into bottles like this. And that's why I kept all of these bottles, because you get to reuse them. So when it's being brewed open like this, you're just increasing all of the biology. They're growing, they're multiplying, they're expanding. But once you put them in and seal the environment, they're not going to grow and expand as much. So it's not going to keep making it more vinegary. However, it is going to carbonate it. And that's going to be really nice, because then you're going to have a beautiful, fun, fizzy drink that's going to taste delicious, just like the kombuchas we know and love. So I'll see you on the other side when I go about making that video. Love y'all. Last thing, this is what it looks like when I've sealed it. So you want to make sure it's really tight, the seal, so that no bugs can get in, because that's the main reason why we're actually covering it. It's sugar water, so lots of bugs and other things are going to be attracted to that. You don't want them to be able to get in and eat it. Also, you want to make sure there's good airflow. So I actually put this one by a window. The window is always left open, so it's going to be able to breathe really well, because you don't want it to get stagnant in that way. So this is my main floor control next to an open window, a really nice, taut and tight container, making sure it can breathe, but not be able to let any bugs in. So here we are, a day into it, and what I highly encourage is each day, picking up my son here, we're making a video together, that's what I'm thinking, is each day you come to your beautiful brew that's being magically manifested for you to enjoy, and you send it some positive, loving, beautiful, soulful, energetic energy. And there's a bunch of research happening with like Dr. Emoto and others. There's this awesome, she calls herself the Water Woman, I believe. I'll share a link to some video that she put out, and it's just so incredible that she's showing like how her consciousness is being mirrored by the crystals that form when you freeze water. So she can imagine things in her mind and send it into the water, freeze it, and then it will literally make an image of that. And I believe part of what's being, happening here is she's consciously connecting with the living organisms in water and water itself. And it's able to reflect her consciousness. So anyway, that's what we're doing here. We're coming to the water and we're sending it beautiful thoughts about whatever you want this magic potion to be. So, do you want it to help you thrive as an individual and cure you of a particular thing or whatever it is? You can send these thoughts into the water, and this is how we're making magic potion. And in later quests, we're going to get into using a bunch of different herbs to make potion, because fermentation, bringing in life, biology, the consciousness of fungi, bacteria, yeast, and all these organisms, right? Bringing that consciousness into plant medicine and other things you can add into these brews. I mean, this is potion making. So here's what we're doing. We're making some potion. So highly encourage for you to go to your jar, wherever it is, however many you got after you make them, and every day say and empower them with whatever you want them to be empowered with, right? It's an open landscape here of what you do with your magic. So here we are, day 5, and I'm gonna check on this beautiful brew. And you come in here and we look, and it's bubbling and alive, just like a nice potion brew ought to look, right? You actually come down here, you can see all the bubbles and the life floating up through that. So it's all totally normal. Anyway, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna taste this. And this is really important for a lot of reasons. Because first, you want to ease yourself into this potion. You don't want to drink too much. Certainly if you haven't really had potions like this before, you really want to ease yourself into it. Also, this helps you know the difference between how long you ferment it. So if you come and you taste a little bit each day, you're easing yourself into the brew, and you're seeing how it reacts to you. And you're seeing how it changes throughout the fermentation cycle. So I'm going to take a little sip here. Always like to blow out first before drinking so I don't get any of the SCOBY. But yeah, that was actually really good. So I'm 5 days in. I'm tempted to cut it off now, because the longer you wait, the more vinegary it is, and the more life there is as well. So they're reproducing right now quite rapidly. But once you bottle them, which is what we're going to do next, the life slows down in its growth. Okay, so right now what you're doing is you're producing more life, but that life is also producing vinegar as one of its byproducts, and alcohol. So as this biology is creating that alcohol and the vinegar, what we're doing is we're triple extracting the different herbs and medicinal plants that we put into here, because we're boiling them at the beginning to make the tea. So in this case, it's just yerba mate, but in future brews, there's all sorts of different medicinal and magical herbs to be using. So boiling would be one step, and oftentimes you might not even need to boil, and sometimes that might not be preferable, depending on the plant. However, as the biology is making vinegar and alcohol, that's 2 additional methods to extract different compounds out of the medicinal and magical plants. But of course, it's the fungi, the bacteria, and everything else in here that's then interacting, doing horizontal gene transfer with each other, but then also engaging with these magical compounds. So it's really, this is where all the potions come in, because there's so much variety and potential depending on what different plants you mix, how long you ferment for, or what type of biology you're getting. So this is why every brew is going to kind of have a unique power and potion to it. But then also the consciousness. So this is, again, so important, that the energy and the thoughts that you're sending to the water. So if this is sounding too woo-woo, I highly suggest looking into the science behind all of this, where our consciousness affects the crystalline structure. And what I believe, and what a lot of these researchers also allude to, is we're interacting with the consciousness of water and the microorganisms that live in the water. And then we can change the literal chemical and structural makeup of the water with what we're sending into it. So I really just want to double down on recommending that daily you come and you can taste now. Take small tastes to see how your body reacts before ever drinking a large glass of this, because it could be really, distressful, especially if you start getting into herbs that you're not used to. You really want to make sure you're tasting it first before, again, drinking a lot of it. And when it comes to magic and potions, a little bit goes a long ways. So if you ferment it longer, you're going to have more vinegar and more alcohol, less sugar, shorter, more sugar, more sweet. You get the idea. So that's, it's always personal preference how long you want it to go. Me, I always want to take it at least to a minimum to where it's really bubbling and alive like this, so it's full of life. So at this point, it's really just preference on taste. You're not really going to degrade the magical properties of the probiotics here. Day 6, and we're going to talk about SCOBY'S. Now, SCOBY is this superorganism, if you will, that's forming at the top. You see the layer of it here. It's not really forming that well on this one. We're going to get into why in a moment. And then you see in the center of this one forming quite nicely, but still, you only get the film of it at the edges here. Get the main SCOBY in the center there. So, what is SCOBY? SCOBY is an acronym that stands for Symbiotic Community of Bacteria and Yeast. Yeast being a type of fungi. However, the way that we are collecting our culture and starting these up, we're getting a lot more than just yeast fungi. We're getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of types of fungi, depending on how ancient and awesome our soil is. And this is really important because fungi are like the primordial alchemists of our planet. They're incredible organisms. They're the ones that literally ate the rocks at the beginning of time and made soil and life on this planet possible. Fungi are incredible. And I saw this meme. It was a hilarious meme, and it said, "We all have a little Barbie in us." No, really, we all have enough microplastics to make a Barbie within our bodies. And I laugh, but I only laugh because I have a new perspective on this, One, there's a lot of papers on this, but two, my direct experience of this is I was hiking in the forest, and I collect garbage whenever I see it, and I remember picking up a bottle. It's happened a couple times now, and when I picked up the bottle, it was half eaten, and it was attached to the bottom of the bottle that was eating it was literal fungi strands, the strands of the mycelial network that had been digesting and eating that bottle. And I dug around in the soil a little bit to look like, or is there other plastic remains in here? Is it just breaking it down? But I couldn't find any extra plastic. So I firmly believe that fungi, and I've had experience with it, can break down these microplastics and all sorts of other toxins that are in our bodies. So that's another reason why this medicine is just so healing and powerful. And that's not even getting into all the benefits of bacteria. Maybe another day for that. One more thing about the SCOBY is the SCOBY is made up of tons of vitamins, tons of minerals, and protein. So what's interesting is I didn't add anything with protein in it to any of these cultures. Remember, the main ingredients were sugar and carbs, right? However, the biology and our cultures were able to take that sugar and turn it into protein. And also important minerals like vitamin B12. So, you don't get vitamin B12 without the organisms that are making vitamin B12, right? So a lot of people are like, vegans are deficient in B12. And it's actually, the reason a lot of us are deficient in B12 has nothing to do with whether or not we're eating B12, but whether or not we have the organisms living within us that are producing B12 and all the other vitamins and minerals and everything else we need. Because it's really the microorganisms that can take sugar, a basic building block of our reality, and turn it into anything else that we need. There's a lot of science on this, and I can share with you some links in the show notes as well that kind of get into this. But the very basic of it is when you're drinking these brews, we're drinking the organisms that live in this, they just give us so much. And again, it's like the miracle of being able to turn sugar into proteins, right? So if you have the organisms in your body that can produce the protein you need, then the whole myth of, you need to consume so much protein is just that, it's just a myth. because these organisms can take sugar and turn it into protein, which is literally what they're doing here, and literally what they're doing inside our guts if they're living in there, right? Okay, so that's another little fun one. Okay, so backing it up, there's some major factors that will influence the development of our cultures and the health of our organisms. One of them being how much oxygen is exposed. So you see this, there's a huge amount of oxygen relative to the container size. Not just oxygen, but air, like the air in general, right? Versus this container. So that's why this one has the best deformed form SCOBY, is it has a lot less surface area to form that SCOBY. That's why it's nice and thick already. Why this, it's not even very present. But also the organisms that love air are one type of organisms. They're gonna thrive in an oxygen and air-rich environment. Why some organisms prefer low oxygen environments, which also happen to be the organisms that live within us. So it's not necessarily the best organisms that love a lot of air. So having a large mouth like I did on these, it's not actually advised, and I was hoping this would happen, and it's actually the only time I've ever attempted to make kombucha with a wide mouth container like this. I just really wanted to see a bunch of different SCOBY'S form so I could talk about them like I am right now. So the size of your lid and how much oxygen is exposed is really going to influence it. The second one is the temperature. So that would be the difference between this wide mouth lid and this one. This one was in a hotter environment, which then that warmer environment is going to bias some other type of organisms, right? So this one I had it in maybe like 80 degrees. I don't use AC in my house, so it's about 80 degrees right now where this one was hanging out. It's about 82 degrees where this guy was hanging out, so a little bit warmer. And then this one was in like high 60s, low 70s, so a lot cooler. So if that's where you have your temperature in your house, I would actually recommend a little bit warmer environment. But also a smaller mouth. So definitely don't follow my lead and use wide mouth containers here. This was more for experimentation purposes. Here we are, day 7. And actually, this guy is doing really well. So I'm going to break him up into a bunch of smaller containers and keep the fermentation process going into a whole bunch of different flavors. So we're going to have a lot of fun with that. And I'm going to show you bottling just one right now. Now, typically day 7 isn't one I would want to bottle. I usually wait around 2 weeks. But certainly I wait until a SCOBY'S fully formed. So we kind of have one going on here. So I think it's the very earliest that I would start doing other stuff and bottling this one, which is why I'm going to bottle one to try it out, see how it goes. But as you see with this brew here, especially since it has a wider mouth, it's taking a lot longer to form that SCOBY. So this one's probably going to go another week at least before I bottle it up and do stuff with it. But I'm really loving how this guy's going, so I got excited, and we're going to split it up into a whole bunch of different flavors and brews, which is really the most fun that we're going to have here. And the point of this quest is for everyone to make their own flavors and their own brews and to keep the experimentation going. However, I highly don't recommend you do so many different flavors at once, because as I was saying earlier, you're going to need to taste them every day to make sure that they're not too strong for you, that you're not adding too many different things that your body can't handle. For example, there's mugwort, lavender, skullcap, rose, spearmint, uva ursi, and kava kava all in this tea. That's a lot. I've had this tea a lot, so I'm familiar with it. I know how it reacts to my body, and I've made some kombucha with it before. So I'm, able to kind of go pretty wild here, but I highly don't recommend you do the same. I suggest trying one different flavor at a time, so that you know how it handles and how your body handles it. All right, and then I'm going to give you a couple more facts and details about how to do the bottling process. So I'm actually using kombucha bottles because I've collected a lot over my time. I got really into kombucha, I was buying a bunch until I realized that, whoops, this industrial kombucha is not that great. Making a monoculture in my body. But either way, I've collected bottles in my time. But if you're going to be doing bottling and fermenting within the bottle as it's closed in order to get the carbonation, it creates a lot of pressure. So you're going to need to have pressure-resistant bottles. Not all bottles are going to be able to withstand that pressure. So I highly recommend, if you're going to do the bottling process, then you get something that is going to be able to handle that pressure and handle the bottling process. Otherwise, you can have things blow up. I learned that the hard way. So yeah, we're going to get into first the bottling process because I'm going to bottle one. I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. And then I'm going to add some kombucha to all of these starts. And basically all I did here, very simple, is these are about 1/8 of a gallon. So I took the recipe and the show notes, divided by 1/8 for each one of these jars, and just made tea. If there was no green, black, or yerba, or any tea that has caffeine generally is what I found, then I add that as well. So I did the divination tea plus yerba mate for these guys. For these ones, the tea was oolong, so that's got caffeine and all the good stuff in it. It's a nice black tea. And pura tea, so that's also a caffeinated tea. So both of these guys already have their tea set, so I didn't do yerba mate here. What I've got going on this, and I'm really excited for this one because I've made this one before and it's freaking incredible, is kava kava with yerba mate. And yes, I don't know how many people have had kava, but it fermented is just such a wild experience. Oh, really excited for this one. And then this one is elderberry with ginger. I didn't put any caffeine in here because, again, experimenting. We're going to see how all of this goes. I've never made one without caffeine, so this will be my first time experimenting without caffeinated tea, so we'll see how that works out. And I want to say, again, that is the point of this quest, for us to experiment and learn together, because that's the fun part about all of this. As we're going through and we're discovering new types of brews and how they work and how they're affecting us and what flavors are incredible, etc., that is the quest process and why we're going through this and why this is a quest, so that we can learn from each other. Please make a video of the completed product and what you did. So you don't have to make a video just like I'm doing, going over the whole process. You can if you want to. The submission for the quest will be, you've made the base, which is what we've done here. That is quest 1. So making the base brew, using just one type of tea, whether it's green tea, black tea, yerba mate tea, it's up to you. That is the basic quest, if you will. So that would be one completion of the quest. A secondary completion would be taking it one step further and making a awesome medicinal brew, bringing in some different medicinal plants. So there's a ton of different medicinal plants in each one of these mixtures. I just got this at a local shop that I love here. It was a blend on their own, making sure all the ingredients are organic. So I used a couple different blends that I've really enjoyed to make kombucha with, and same thing with these. So this is my journey into using pre-made blends, making kombucha out of them. Gonna be a lot of fun. All right, beautiful people. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take about, I've got a half cup measuring cup here. I'm going to do about 1/2 to 3/4 cup, add it to each one of these brews, and then I'll see you in a second. All right, now these are like the ideal jar for making kombucha brews like this. I find that the equal opening to the jar size, so instead of it going smaller like you saw here, or going wider like you saw there, same height or same size, I find it does a really nice brew. But also, these guys have the lids, so when it comes to like putting on the strainer and putting something over, I could just use a towel and just screw it on so it could breathe still. But then when it comes to actually sealing it to carbonate it, then you just take the actual lid that it comes with, the bulb jars, then you can put that on. So it can stay in the same container the whole time, which I really love. But I'm going to show you the harder way of going about it, which is what I do, because I make a lot at a time. So we're going to get out one of those kombucha jars that I have that I know is pressure sealed, and I'm going to show you how to go about this. So first, you're going to want to add a little bit more sugar to feed the guys before you bottle them up. So I'm going to get a little bit of maple sugar here, about a teaspoon. I'm going to put it at the bottom there. So 1 second. What I find is just enough to lightly cover the bottom of the jar is perfect for adding extra sugar into the jar. Next, I'm going to add some chia seeds. Now, chia seeds are really fun because they're really going to... It's if you want extra ferment or extra carbonation, because the chia seeds, they're like little apartment buildings for our kombucha. Our cultures, rather, all the organisms can live on the chia seed and the little gel that the chia seed puts out. So it creates this like awesome community of culture around each one of the chia seeds. So it's a really awesome amendment, but be easy on it. And just so I don't forget, when you're doing the carbonation in the jars, after you've left them in there for a few days, I generally go a whole week, and you leave them in the warm, same temperature you're, culturing at right now. Make sure you cool them down. I put them in the fridge before you open them up, because if not, they can explode, and they often do. So don't open it until you've cooled it down, and then it's going to be this awesome carbonated beverage. It's just so delicious. All right, so I'm going to add another little teaspoon of chia seeds into our jar, and then I'll see you in a second. All right, so now we have a little chia seed in there. I probably don't have to tell you I'm leaving every time, because it's not like you notice. And the last thing I'm going to do with this experiment here, done this before, is I'm going to add some Damiana leaf, some actual leaf out of this Damiana leaf awesome bag. I love Damiana. It's such a powerful herb. Look it up if you care to. I'm going to add some actual leaf to the jar, to the fermentation process, so that I was telling you before, the alcohol and the vinegar that is in the brew itself can extract all the delicious, powerful medicinal qualities of the Damiana into the jar. And now we've got some Damiana in there. So what we have in this jar to bottle it up is I added some chia, some sugar, and some medicinal leaf. That is a lot. Generally, you might not want to add so many things to a jar, but I'm having fun here. We're experimenting. Let's see how this goes. All right, so I'm going to put a funnel on, and I'm going to pour in some kombucha. Now, if I have any fermentation snobs out there, you might be saying to yourself, wait, you're not making kombucha. And that is correct. Kombucha is if you make it with black tea, very boring, and you're using a particular culture. So when we're going and gathering ancient soil like we just did, and we're adding all the magic that we're adding, it's probably more accurate to just call these things magical potions, because that's exactly what they are. So I'm just going to use kombucha sometimes because it's helpful for people to connect it with stuff that they're used to, and, don't want any witch hunts here, do we? So I'll cross back and forth between calling it kombucha and whatnot, but either way. So you don't want to fill it all the way up. I filled it up to about there. Maybe I'll top it up after this. And that's essentially it. So I'll close this up, and I'll show you what this looks like when I come back in about a week. Maybe. We'll see how this goes. To finish all of this off. So I got these guys all started. Oh yeah, one more thing. I am going to add some bee pollen in every other one. So I have 2 jars of the same brew, so I get to try out with what it looks like adding bee pollen, because I've been really inspired to be doing that. So I've got some bee pollen here. I feel like there's just so much awesomeness in the bee pollen. Also, there's some microorganisms in here that the bees had collected up off of all the flowers. So this is wild bee pollen here. So I think that's something else awesome to add here. So I'm going to experiment with that. So every other one's going to have some bee pollen. Finally, last thoughts. I left a little bit in this jar, so you can kind of see relative. I'm not even sure what percentage that is, but I just do it by eye and it seems to work. So I left this amount. I'm going to brew some more of the base brew and fill this right back up, and it's just going to keep on going. And as you see how ridiculous it is, and ridiculously cheap it is to make kombucha when it's literally just tea and sugar and water, some oil and stuff if you're into adding that, which again makes it so it's not quite kombucha. Which is the other thing I was going to share with you, is I am going to be adding some oil. I got some Moroccan oil here, some argan oil. Really awesome stuff. I'm going to add a couple squirts to each of this and make sure I'm feeding some oil to my fungi in here and giving them a bunch of nice food. You don't have to do, special oils. I just like to make my potions using all the best stuff in magic and all the wonderful things I've collected. So I'm showing you how I've stored these. If you want to buy stuff, I hate buying things. I'm always about reusing stuff. You could buy cheesecloth, and then you can use that instead of what I've got going on here. But I just used baby blankets. We got really organic and really nice material, organic dyes and all that good stuff. Baby blankets, so I figured they would be the best thing to cover our potions with. So that's all we see here, just baby blankets being wrapped around with some string and rubber bands that we had. And then the bottles that I had, I just put them all in the same container that they had come in. And I was able to wrap the baby blanket over them and put the lids on. So pretty straightforward, right? Okay. All right, now I'll see you in a week. Okay, beautiful people. Coming to the end of our potion making journey here. We're going to be doing some bottling. So I want to just finally show you how I stored these. You don't want them to be in direct sunlight. Direct sunlight kills bacteria and biology. Same way it does out in the garden. That's why you want to keep your soil covered. So anyway, just showing you how I covered these, but I'm going to go ahead and uncover them. And I will see you all in a second once I get the station set up. So now we get to explore all the beautiful SCOBY'S and how unique they all look. Obviously the different cultures provided different SCOBY'S, or culture mediums, all the different stuff I added, the different teas. Yeah, really cool. Yeah, this one. So you notice this one was the one that I used to do everything. So you saw how fast it was able to produce a new SCOBY again and go back to being a full jar of life. Pretty cool. Now these two have just been fermenting the whole time. Now I'm gonna, my silicone straw, I'm gonna go through and taste everything. As always, make sure you're tasting it. Oh man, these flavored ones were unreal. So freaking delicious. This one, which is younger, was really sweet. Really loved it. I'm actually gonna bottle up a few of those. The one that I had put down in the cooler environment, it was a lot more sour. This one was lovely, and I'm gonna bottle this one. So yeah, I want to actually show you the results of the last bottling. You can look at it right here and you can see the cap right there. Look at that. It's about ready to blow off. And if you tried to open this, which I highly don't recommend, I'm going to see if I can do this without making, yeah, you can hear it releasing some pressure. So I mentioned before, you want to put this in a fridge now before opening it. So I'm not even going to open that. That'll make a massive mess. You want to cool that down. So this is what they're going to look like when they're done. They're gonna have a whole bunch of pressure. This is really nice and carbonated, and here's a finished product. Freaking awesome. So we're gonna make a whole bunch more of those. Also, if you want to get really fun and complex, you can start adding some medicinal herbs. Like I did with the first one, I added a little bit of Damiana. But I've got some other ones I'm gonna try, like skullcap as well. And we'll see if I get fun and try a few others. But you also don't have to try that. And I won't have that in this video. I will make my own submission for a quest talking about some of the medicinal potions that I made. So I will also play the quest as well. Okay, so now the first step is get out your bottles. If you're using this method, I'll just tell you real quick because then it would be super simple. You're just gonna add the next stuff you wanna add, whether that's your plants or your sugar or chia or whatever, and then just put a cap on it. That's it. So this method is definitely the simplest method because you don't have to move them around containers. This method is a little bit harder, and I will see you on the other side. I'm actually going to get out a bunch of bottles, and I'm going to put about a teaspoon of sugar and follow the recipe I shared with you guys all before. Now you can make your teaspoon, heaping or not, just depends on how cool you are. Alright, so now I've added the sugar. Now I'm going to go back through and add a same teaspoon of chia seeds. So adding chia and sugar is really easy because you can just drink them down without even noticing really, but more complicated things like the elderberry I'm going to add, or even the dry leaf of medicinal herbs, those aren't going to be as pleasant to just drink right down. So I'm only going to add those to a few of them, and I'll probably do that here in a moment. Okay, so now that I've added the chia and the sugar, the next step is it's just going to be to add some kombucha broth, or, potion broth, if you will, and fill each one of these up. So that'll be my next go about. And yep, gonna look like this. Personally, I don't mind making a mess because I'm just gonna clean it all up at once after. But you can get a glass jar like this and just pour them in. And just do a little bit like that. I'm gonna have to use both hands to use a little chopstick to work down some of the mother, and I'll see you all on the other side. Okay, so I thought about leaving one for vinegar, decided against it, but if you want to, you basically just leave it, keep tasting it, give it a couple more weeks, and once it tastes like, your apple cider vinegar, then you've got yourself a vinegar. Awesome. However, I halfway through realized I wouldn't have enough for my bottles if I didn't use it all, so I did. Also, I didn't save any when I was, past life of brew making like this. I'd always save some for our culture for the future. However, with this style where we're going out and collecting soil from different parts of ancient forests, I want each brew to be a unique culture. So I'm getting more and more diversity. So next time I want to go make some more, I'm going to go and collect some new soil from a different forest and continue to get that diversity. And then also for the SCOBY, which you see the film of it kind of everywhere. It looks a little bit nasty, but this is really healthy stuff. So I'm actually going to eat all of this. It's not that gross. It's not gross at all, actually. I love it. I didn't wait for it to fully form. So other styles of kombucha making, you'd have a fully formed SCOBY and you keep using it and you can do other stuff with it. And if I left one to make a vinegar, it would have. However, when it's just not fully formed yet, it was able to be distributed amongst all the bottles so that you're eating it, which is great because the SCOBY is super healthy for you. Okay, so that's essentially it. What I'm going to personally do now is I'm going to pick some of these bottles to add some different herbs to. You can do that as well. And then I'm going to bottle them up, store them for another 4 or 5 days, maybe a week. Wait until I see that bottle cap trying to blow off, cool them, and then we're done. So yeah, that's how you can make some potion. All right, to wrap this quest up, a few disclaimers and final thoughts, and a little proof of yum. So I'm gonna actually drink this beautiful brew, and I'm outside, and I'm about to put in a healing hole, which you see my most recent healing hole here. And that's my favorite time to enjoy these brews. They got a little caffeine in them, tons of freaking nourishment, amino acids, B12, and so much stuff that they're great pre-workouts and pre-exercise in my opinion. So that is what I'm going to drink it for. And the healing holes, you're going to learn about those in a future quest. And also I wanted to tell you there's a lot of reasons why this ancient potion making, healing, gut journey, etc. was the first quest. And you're going to find out in future quests why it made a lot of sense to have this at the beginning. One of those reasons is there's a long waiting period in this quest as the fermentation process takes place. It could be several weeks. So feel free to move on to additional quests while you're waiting. And some disclaimers, please make sure you're tasting and not chugging your brews. Having a little bit throughout the entire fermentation process is going to help your body get adjusted to all of this magic and this potion. And even after you've made your brew, again, just try it out at the beginning before chugging it or having a whole bunch. You really want to make sure your body has time to adjust. Also, you really want to make sure you're getting soil from really ancient and healthy forests. So that's part of this quest, and part of the biggest journey of it is that travel to an ancient forest and getting really out there and deep to find the most incredible soil you can find. I didn't actually take my my phone on that journey to collect soil, so I don't have any videos of me going out there and collecting it. Another thought that is just a wonderful thought, it's that the best brewing container in my opinion, and I haven't got around to making this, is unfinished clay pots. So pots that are still porous, but of course don't leak. Because when you're brewing in porous clay pots, the biology actually inhabits the clay container. And a lot of ancient cultures, at least when I was learning about this, I learned about this. The ancient cultures thought that the pot itself was inhabited by spirits. And this might entirely be true. The spirit of the biology that is inhabiting that pot. So if you have any clay pots, you can do your main brewing inside the clay pot. And some cultures actually saw this as the pot being inhabited by the spirits of, we know them as microbiology. I'm not sure if these cultures understood that or not. It doesn't matter, because I think they understood the deeper truth. That after these pots were inhabited by spirits, they can continue to make more and more brews out of them. And I think this is actually where a lot of the history of like genie in a lamp and the spirits that come inside that, and also where the term spirits for alcohol comes from, because the spirits that are required to make the brew. Anyway, some thoughts there. All right, now to get into proof of yum. So I'll put this down. You can see me open the bottle here. This one had a ton of life in it. So it's like so tight on here, the lid. And I'm doing this outside because I think it still might, want to come alive. So look at that. It's even been cooled down and it'll still react that way. So bear in mind that depending on how fertile our brews are, they might want to be opened outside. Yeah, look at that. It is just bubbling to life. Yes. So I'm going to enjoy some of this. Then I'm going to get into some physical exercise, making a healing hole, one of your future quests. So here I go. Oh, wow. This is really freaking good, actually. Probably one of the best kombuchas I've ever had. Yep, okay. Now, remembering to keep in mind my own rule to sip, not chug, even though my body is telling me to just drink this whole dang thing. Which I probably will end up doing because I'm much more experienced with making these things and I'm thinking my body is totally fine with all of this. However, please sip, don't chug. All right, and if I don't end up uploading this video, you know what type of brew this was. And it'll continue to make more sense why we started off this way, making these types of brews, because a lot of the other quests are actually predicated on us healing our guts this way. And all right, I'll leave that there. I'm about to have fun making another healing hole, which is one of your upcoming quests. And again, a quick reminder that this quest takes a little while, so feel free to move forward to some of the other quests whilst the fermentation process is happening. And last thing, if you want to actually claim your quest, then go see in the show notes is where you're going to find a link to the next follow-up video that actually shows you how to use the tools to claim your quest and earn some tokens, and gets into why we're doing it that way. But the big story is we get to learn from each other. So part of claiming your quest is documenting your story. So you don't have to do the entire process like I did, but definitely at the end. Show us the brew that you've made, talk about it, share a little bit about your journey, what type of brew you made, because in this way we actually get to learn from each other. What type of brews people are making, how they made it, how it was working for them. And that's really a big point of the quests for me and for this community, is for us to learn from each other and to grow and evolve and explore all of this together and have a whole bunch of fun doing it, because why not? I'm gonna have some more of this, then dive into this healing hole. I love you all so much. I think these quests will be a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy it too. Please leave any comments or feedback or ideas for future quests you might like to see in the comments, and we can create this questing journey together and have a whole bunch of fun doing it. So, love y'all. Cheers.